Robin's next in Phoenix, Democratic caller.
Yes. First, real quick, for those that are not real familiar with women's rights, if you'll watch On the Basis of Sex, which is the story of RBG, and then follow it with a net 3-part miniseries called Misinformation, which picks up from basically 1973 on through around 1980 or so. And that's where the on the right got the ERA bylined, basically. I'm 67, and I graduated high school in 74. So all of this is real familiar with me, and I'm college educated, corporate retired, and I live in so this misogynistic behavior, I saw this back in Texas even in the early 90s that was getting out of hand. And a lot of it started in Oklahoma with the churches. I want to say the alternative churches, the evangelical churches, okay, they started with all the rock and roll music, and which did bring in listeners and stuff. But one of the churches that I attended, because my boss was going, and my husband and I went to politics, etc., and we went several times.
Hey, Robin. Robin, I apologize, but you are breaking up. It's difficult to follow your line of argument. Lauren Leader, do you have a response for Robin based on what she has said?
Yeah, I think she was just saying that everyone should go watch the RBG movie, which is great. And actually, there's a documentary about her, too, which is really, really interesting and very well done. And there's been some new movies recently that talk about the history of the 1970s and the women's rights movement, which, drives me nuts because I think most Americans don't know. We spend so much, there is a lot of coverage of civil rights, of the civil rights movement that almost every American kid learns in school. Everyone knows, who Martin Luther King is, as they should. But what they don't know is they don't know, Gloria Steinem, and they don't know, Phyllis Schlafly, and they don't know, the sort of fight for women's rights. I think, many women of my generation, and as I say, I'm turning 50 this year, so I was born in 75, really have just grown up in a world where we thought all the doors were open to us. And it's been really shocking along the way. And I think, the history of movements is, for all movements, is often driven by people's anger, right? That they feel a sense of anger and injustice because they see something that is not right, and it drives them to act. And that has been a mobilizing factor, as long as this country has been in existence. I mean, we were founded on anger. We were founded on rejection of oppression and monarchy and tyranny. And I think that as, women of a new generation are coming to understand what rights they do and don't have, the limits of their place in American society, those who would seek to make them, to marginalize them, I think that can be very galvanizing. And as I say, we're nonpartisan at all and together, but we really try to focus on helping people take the things that matter most to them individually and turn it into civic action. Really learn, like, how do you stand up and make a difference? How do you hold your elected officials accountable? How do you think about running yourself? All of those things are all part of what we try to do to give people the tools and the power to put it in their hands.
Cornelia in Cottonwood, Idaho, Republican.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I would like to just ask this young lady if she is very grateful and happy that her parents did not abort her. Over the years, since abortion was legalized in America, we have lost 70 million children. Thousands and thousands of babies are killed every year, and some even so radical that they want it to go up. Some governors, so radical they want that so-called right to kill all the way up to the time the baby is being born.
All right.
It's just unimaginable how our country has become so calloused.
Okay, Cornelia, we'll get a response. Lauren Leader.
Well, so first of all, I want to just set the record straight on a few things. Of course, I'm grateful to be here. I'm also grateful that my mother had the choice that she had before I was born to terminate a pregnancy of a fetus that was not going to survive. I personally could have died from a miscarriage where I was bleeding for days. And if I had not had the opportunity to have what's commonly called a DNC, which is essentially an abortion, I'd be dead. There are thousands of women across the country who absolutely want their children, who want to be parents, who are desperate to have their babies, but who face life and death decisions in places like Idaho and other states that have extreme bans that prevent life-saving care of women who will die or become infertile or face other catastrophic health crises if they're unable to access the care that they need if something goes wrong when they want their children. There is no question that there are people who, that abortion is a very complicated and emotional issue. I deeply relate to people who find it abhorrent and, want to save children. I also believe in saving the lives of women that are here. And what we've seen with the world post Dobbs is women dying and facing horrific consequences. We've also had 14-year-old girls. There's a story of a young girl in Mississippi who was raped. She could not access what were the supposed exceptions in the law, and she was forced to have a baby at 14 and have her rapist child. Now, we all have different opinions about that, but until very recently, that was a choice that she could make with her family. And that's what I believe is that, we should have a choice. And obviously, many people feel very differently. I think one of the things that's happened since the Dobbs decision is because of these horrific consequences of losing that right. A lot of folks who were, really anti-abortion have come to understand that if the law doesn't allow, for life-saving care, that's a horrific choice, and that we're forcing a set of circumstances that I think most people would not want, which is why even in very conservative states like Ohio and Kentucky and other places that have put abortion rights access on the ballot, they've passed, and that even conservatives who, were otherwise consider themselves pro-life supported those measures because they don't want to see women dying in the parking lots of hospitals. So that's the first thing. The second thing I just want to say is that I certainly appreciate how horrific it seems, late-term abortion. There is nobody who is advocating voluntary late-term abortion. But again, I have friends who were carrying non-viable fetuses, meaning, babies that had died in their womb, and it would have killed them to have to deliver that child, literally could have killed them. So, late-term abortion is horrific. We all understand it. But if it's in service of saving the life of someone who may have other children, who has a family, who has a life, to me, that's not a hard call. But look, this is a very emotional issue. It has been at the heart of American politics since 1980, really since longer. I should have said 70. So I do understand how people feel about it, but I think there's a lot of nuance that gets lost in the debate.